The police cruiser rolled onto my property just after sunset. I was standing near my front gate when I saw the flashing lights coming up the private road. At first, I thought there had been an emergency. Then I saw the HOA president stepping out behind the officers. Her name was Karen, and for months she had been insisting that part of my property belonged to the neighborhood association. She had sent me warnings. She had demanded that I remove a storage building. She had even claimed that I was violating HOA rules by using land that, according to her, was community property. But I had never agreed with her, because I had something she didn't: the documents. That evening, Karen pointed toward my property and told the officers that I was refusing to follow HOA restrictions. She claimed I had built on common land. She said the HOA had authority over the entire section. One officer approached me and calmly asked, "Sir, can you explain what's going on?" I nodded. "Yes, and I have the paperwork." Karen immediately interrupted. "He doesn't have any right to that land. The HOA owns it." The officers looked at each other. Then one of them asked, "Do you have documentation showing that?" Karen smiled. "I have the HOA records." I told the officer, "I have the county records, the original deed, the property survey, and the recorded plat." That changed the conversation. I walked inside and returned with a thick folder. I placed it on the hood of my truck. The first document was my deed. It clearly described the boundaries of my property. The second was the official survey. The third showed the recorded easement that Karen had been talking about. And the fourth document was the one that made everyone stop. It was a county record showing who actually owned the disputed section. The officer slowly read the page. Then he looked at Karen. "Ma'am, this doesn't say what you're claiming." Karen's expression changed. She stepped closer. "That document is outdated." The officer shook his head. "It has a recording number." He pointed toward the page, and it was filed with the county. Karen insisted that the HOA had another document proving ownership, so the officers asked her to produce it. She opened her folder. She searched through several papers, then several more. Nothing. Finally, she pulled out an HOA map. The officer examined it. "This is an HOA map," he said. "Yes," Karen replied, "but it isn't a deed." Karen went silent. The second officer picked up the survey and compared it with the map. That's when he noticed something important. The HOA map showed the disputed land as community property, but the official survey showed it inside my parcel. The difference wasn't a small mistake. It was an entire section of land. The officers asked me how long I had owned the property. I told them I had purchased it years earlier. Then they asked whether I had ever received written notice that my deed was being challenged. I said no. Karen suddenly became defensive. "We've been trying to enforce the neighborhood rules." The officer replied, "Rules don't establish ownership." That sentence completely changed the mood. Karen had called the police, expecting them to force me to obey the HOA. Instead, the officers were now examining the documents she had brought. One officer asked her a simple question: "Can you show us a recorded document transferring this property to the HOA?" She couldn't. She tried explaining that previous HOA boards had always treated the land as common property, but the officer interrupted. "Past practice doesn't replace a recorded ownership document." Karen looked furious. Then she pointed at my storage building. "At minimum, that structure violates the HOA rules." I asked the officer if he wanted to see the permit. He nodded. I brought that out too. The permit was valid. The structure was located entirely within my property boundaries, and according to county records, the HOA had no authority over that section. The officers finished reviewing everything. Then one of them handed my documents back. "Based on what we've seen tonight, this appears to be a private property dispute. We don't have grounds to make him remove anything." Karen couldn't believe it, but he refuses to follow the HOA. The officer looked at her. "That's not a police matter unless there's evidence of crime." Silence. For the first time, Karen didn't have an answer. She had called the police believing the flashing lights would intimidate me. Instead, the officers had read the paperwork, and the paperwork told a very different story. Before leaving, one officer gave me some advice. If the HOA believes it owns this land, they need to resolve that through the proper legal process. Keep these original documents safe. I thanked him. The cruisers eventually disappeared down the road. Karen remained standing near the gate. She looked at the folder in my hands. Then she looked back toward the disputed property. Her confidence was gone. But the story didn't end that night. The next morning, I contacted the county recorder and requested certified copies of every relevant document. I also hired a property attorney to review the records. A few days later, the attorney found something even more interesting. The HOA's own recorded documents referenced the same survey I had shown the officers. In other words, the HOA had access to the correct boundaries. They simply weren't using them in the map Karen had been showing homeowners. My attorney sent a formal letter requesting that the HOA stop claiming ownership of my land. This time, there was no angry confrontation, no shouting, no police, just paperwork. And within weeks, the HOA stopped sending me notices about that property. Karen never apologized, but she stopped walking onto my land. She stopped sending workers toward my storage building. And most importantly, she stopped telling everyone that the HOA owned the disputed section. The entire situation taught me one important lesson. When someone claims they own your property, don't argue louder. Check the records, because opinions can change. HOA maps can be wrong. People can make accusations. But recorded documents tell a different story. That night, the police didn't take my side because they knew me. They didn't take my side because Karen was wrong about everything. They simply read the documents. And once they did, the situation became very clear. The land wasn't the HOA's. It was mine. And sometimes the most powerful response to an HOA president isn't an argument. It's opening a folder and saying, "Read this.